few months ago, following the release of the Rise of Skywalker teaser trailer at Star Wars Celebration and the potential for the return of Palpatine in Episode 9, we looked at how Palpatine could have possibly survived in the aftermath of Return of the Jedi. In that video, entitled How Palpatine Survived and Will Return in Episode 9 The Rise of Skywalker, we discussed Emperor Palpatine's true long game that he spent decades preparing, known simply as the Contingency. The Contingency was Palpatine's backup plan should the Sith Lord come to recognize he faced a failed empire that could no longer protect him, threatening his long-term goal of unlocking the final secrets from the dark side. In our previous Palpatine video, we discussed how Palpatine recognized the failure of his empire at the Battle of Endor and executed the Contingency prior to the arrival of the Rebel fleet. This video is going to be entirely different from that earlier video. We won't be going into detail regarding the Contingency or any other topics focused on the how of Palpatine's survival and reappearance in Episode 9. Instead, we'll focus on the why it was in my opinion that Palpatine had to disappear from the galaxy following the Battle of Endor, and then return at a later date, which in this case of course is during Episode 9. This implies some foresight and intentional planning and deception on Palpatine's part, so we'll go into detail within the canon lore on exactly what Palpatine realized prior to confronting Luke in Episode 6, and what he ultimately feared that would prompt him to execute the Contingency and disappear from the known galaxy. If you've watched our previous Palpatine video, you'll know I'm not a big fan of Palpatine using any type of cloning methods or even binding his essence and consciousness to an artifact of some kind as Lord Momin did within Star Wars canon, as a means in which to explain his survival. I prefer simply an explanation through some element of the dark side itself, given that it's a pathway to many abilities some would consider unnatural, allowing for many amazing feats to have arisen within legends. The good news is, with the film only a few days away at this point, we'll hopefully learn those incredible details soon enough. Here, I want to focus on the why, and point out a few interesting aspects within the Star Wars canon lore that could explain the primary motivations of Palpatine, connecting his actions in Episode 6 to those culminating within Episode 9. Let me start with the argument of this video and the basis for why Palpatine had to disappear from the known galaxy for over 3 decades. By the Battle of Endor, Palpatine had a sense that as the Sith Lord Darth Sidious, he had lost. He failed in developing a means in which to prevent the Force, particularly its light side, from striking back at him. The catalyst of this realization was based on 2 points. Vader's own light within him that had not been extinguished even after 2 decades, and Luke carried with him a destiny that conflicted precisely with his own. Even more important, these 2 truths symbolized that the Force was striking back at him, and thus, he had to retreat, disappear from the Force's actors in the physical known galaxy, and rely on his Contingency to survive and fulfill his true end goals with the dark side. With that, let's take a look at the lore to see what Palpatine knew. Although we'll be operating in the realm of Star Wars canon since we are discussing aspects of the films, before jumping into the analogous and important canon details, I first want to look at the same idea as it was so perfectly captured in Legends through the novel Darth Plagueis. We discussed the idea in a recent video, looking at why Plagueis ultimately grew to fear Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn, but we'll review it here briefly. The Darth Plagueis novel demonstrates the repercussions Plagueis had to deal with through his greed and desire to become just as powerful as the Force. These repercussions were manifested in the form of an attack from the Force itself through Anakin Skywalker, a being Plagueis felt was created by the Force to strike at him and Sidious. In the novel, we see that Plagueis and Sidious succeeded in challenging the Force for sovereignty more than a decade before Episode 1, which after months of intense meditation resulted in the galaxy being tipped towards the dark side. It was a major win for the Sith, but following this victory, Plagueis, without the knowledge of Sidious, would reach too far. He attempted to become the Force itself by creating a being of his own who was powerful in the Force. Again, roughly a decade before the Phantom Menace, Plagueis stretched out to influence every living entity in the galaxy, but to no end. Even worse, Plagueis recognized the Force retreated from him and grew silent. Although Plagueis was undeterred in the ultimate victory of the Sith, he also knew that in challenging the Force and tipping the balance towards the dark side, there had to be a cost in return, that the Force might be planning its own retribution against the Sith. Therefore, when Anakin Skywalker appeared a decade later, championed as the Jedi Chosen One who would destroy the Sith and bring balance to the Force, Plagueis was terrified, believing he had undone the grand plan of the Sith through the Force striking back at them. And unfortunately for the Sith, Sidious would kill Plagueis before he could determine a solution to this counterattack, or inform his apprentice about the threat. So why is any of this important for Palpatine and canon and Episode 9? Fortunately, for those of us who are fans of the Plagueis novel, this concept of the Force striking back, and particularly the Force striking back at the Sith during the Rule of Two era, has been brought back into canon through the Tarkin novel. In the novel, following Palpatine revealing his desire to coax the final secrets from the dark side with his apprentice Darth Vader, just as he and Plagueis had done, the novel reveals from Palpatine's perspective, quote, "Darth Plagueis had once remarked that the Force can strike back. The death of a star didn't necessarily curtail its light, and indeed Sidious had seen evidence of that sometimes, even in Vader, the barest flicker of persistent light." Due to Palpatine's understanding about the nature of the Force in striking back at the Sith, gathered from his then master Darth Plagueis, Palpatine explicitly stated that his ultimate and primary goal was to make certain the Force could not strike back, and that whatever faint light of hope remained could be destroyed. This isn't just important because it brings the concept of the Force directly striking at Palpatine back into canon, but it gives Palpatine knowledge of this fact that I'd argue goes beyond what he knew in the Plagueis novel. It was a significant worry for Palpatine, as he made it his ultimate goal to achieve what Plagueis also wanted in Legends, to ensure that he was beyond the influence of the Force, that in a way, he became the galaxy's animating principle itself. I also don't bring this up solely for the in-universe lore aspects. In an interview with Empire.com, the co-writer of The Rise of Skywalker, Chris Terrio, was outright in saying that one of two key questions that fueled Episode 9 was the question of what the Force is, and more importantly, how strong it is. As we'll see, building off of Palpatine's fear of the Force striking back at him, I believe the question of the Force's strength is crucial to why Palpatine chose the path he did following the Battle of Endor. It isn't simply that Palpatine wanted to ensure the Force couldn't attack him, but the Aftermath trilogy, specifically the final novel Empire's End, hints at the fact that Palpatine believed he was under attack by the Force at the time of the Battle of Endor, just as Plagueis realized it through the creation of Anakin Skywalker. As Palpatine explained to his protege Gallius Rax that a shuttle of rebels landed on the forest moon of Endor, which of course contained Luke Skywalker, he told Gallius, "Destiny accompanies that ship. There is one on board who challenges the course of fate as I have seen it." This is the same line of thinking Plagueis had when he viewed Anakin Skywalker for the first time within Legends. Like Plagueis in Legends knew Anakin would change the course of history, Palpatine in canon knew Luke would challenge the course of fate. And it wasn't simply Luke at this point prior to the Battle of Endor for Palpatine either, but also Darth Vader, who the Emperor already knew had failed him by that time as well, before the events within the throne room. Therefore, Palpatine was looking at a destiny that challenged his machinations for the galaxy that included two Skywalkers. I believe Palpatine realized something about Luke and Anakin at this point as well. The Last Jedi novelization is clear in establishing that both Skywalkers were favored instruments of the will of the cosmic force. Again, not just the Force, but the will of the Force. This is something that was recognized by Snoke, and that which drove his desire to destroy Luke, seeing his association to the cosmic force as the very thing that endangered his designs for the galaxy. Given Snoke's decades of obtaining a vast and significant knowledge regarding the Force that could only be found in the galaxy's unknown regions, he was certainly unique in the way he understood the Force. However, I believe Palpatine was more than capable of understanding the importance of the Skywalkers in this way through his own knowledge and study of the Force, and as a benefactor of the knowledge gained through the lineage created by Darth Bane. At the Battle of Endor, in sensing a coming Shatterpoint, grave uncertainty, and chaos, I believe Palpatine recognized the Skywalkers carried with them the will of the Force, which challenged his own will and destiny. And this shows the wisdom of Palpatine and the failure of Snoke. Despite knowing that Luke, and the Skywalkers generally, was a favored instrument of the will of the Force, Snoke challenged that will with his own, with the hubris costing him his life. Palpatine, on the other hand, didn't attempt to simply destroy the Skywalkers. As the Aftermath Empire's End novel shows, he knew Luke challenged his destiny and Vader failed him long before the events within his throne room. Palpatine could have just had them both killed then and there, but he had a relatively straightforward goal as he explained to his protege Gallius. He would either replace Vader with Luke as his Sith apprentice, or he would demonstrate his true power, which I believe refers to Palpatine utilizing his contingency to retreat and formulate a better plan to deal with the Force. To again make an analogy with the Darth Plagueis novel, it's analogous to why Plagueis didn't simply kill Anakin when he realized he likely represented a counterattack by the Force against him, choosing instead to target Qui-Gon so Anakin wouldn't be trained. With Luke and Anakin representing the will of the Cosmic Force, it would make no sense simply to attack them, as Palpatine would still be left with confronting the destiny of the Force, just with different instruments later. Therefore, I believe this is why Palpatine executed the contingency through Gallius Rax prior to the Battle of Endor, before victory or defeat in the throne room was established. He recognized that his machinations had to evolve into its next phase, where he learned to combat the will of the Force itself. If you watched our video discussing how Palpatine survived, you'll know that Palpatine's contingency centered around finding a path through and into the unknown regions, specifically to gain access to what he referred to as some origin of the Force, a dark presence formed of a malevolent substance that called out to him. With the canon lore having established the unknown regions as a place that contained long-forgotten knowledge and truths about the Force, and potentially the origins of the Force, embodied in perhaps the most powerful dark side presence within the galaxy, it just makes sense why Palpatine would retreat to the unknown regions if he did sense that Luke and Anakin represented the Force's will, and the light side striking back at him. If an important question going into this final film in the Skywalker saga is the true power of the Force and its ability to strike back, we could very well see Palpatine's end goal in the form of challenging the Force itself. Before ending the video, I just want to make a quick note about Anakin and Luke's role in Episode 9, as I might not have an opportunity to put it out there before the film's released. Although Palpatine's return in The Rise of Skywalker has always been exciting, first because I didn't see it coming, and second due to the potential lore possibilities, there's always been a question about what it means for Anakin's actions in Episode 6, specifically relating to the Chosen One prophecy. Out of all the books, the comics, and the films, the final scenes in Episode 6 within the Emperor's throne room are my favorite, a culmination of the saga that depicts the very heart of Star Wars for me, so anything that could influence that here in Episode 9 does worry me slightly. The canon lore has protected Anakin's actions in Episode 6 to some extent. For example, from Luke's perspective in the Secrets of the Jedi reference book, Luke confirms Anakin was the Chosen One and he brought balance to the Force. Whether Palpatine had foresight of some of the events that would come or not, and whether he survived through the dark side, cloning techniques, or maintaining his essence through an artifact, there are questions that arise in regard to Anakin and his overall arc. For this reason, I wrote the script of this video and our previous Palpatine video from the perspective of Anakin, thinking of ways Palpatine's return could be remedied with his help, and even Luke to a large extent honestly. It's one of the reasons why I focus so much on the Force and dark side, aspects Anakin is the perfect counter to. But I just wanted to say at the end here, I hope that The Rise of Skywalker turns out to be exactly that, with Anakin playing an important role in bringing the saga to an end, as in my opinion, given the lore that exists even within canon, it's something that's necessary. Thank you very much for watching and for the support everyone, and as always, may the Force be with you.